time has come to make a decision. Are we in this thing alone? Or are we in it together?
Okay, hello everyone. So welcome to the Queerness Diaries, and today I am joined by Diego. How are you, Diego?
Hi, Connor. Thank you for having me. I'm good. All good. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, thanks so much for joining. So me and Diego actually met a few weeks ago at the We Create Space awards, and it was super fun in Barcelona. And so today we're going to be talking about your story and kind of hearing everything that's led you to where you are now in Madrid. And I do definitely miss Madrid sometimes. So if you could give a quick introduction to yourself and what you're doing at the moment, just for people to know.
Sure. So myself, I'm Swiss and Spanish, so born and raised in Geneva, but my parents are Spanish, and now I've been living in Spain for the past 5 years. I'm a diversity and inclusion consultant, so I help companies improve all their policies, their initiatives around diversity and inclusion. And I'm also a member of the executive board of 𝐶𝐞 𝐐𝐬𝐬, which is a Spanish LGBT NGO here in Madrid, one of the oldest ones in Spain. And I help also collaborate with companies. So I help the NGO collaborate with different companies, with entities, and also with the government whenever there's a new law that is approved around LGBT inclusion. I try to always support in that sense. So that's a bit what I do at the moment.
Yeah, and I think it's such an awesome thing you do for the community, and it's so important because, you know, even in this day and age with all the progress being made, we definitely have both probably had our journeys in the workplace and finding where we are today. And I kind of wanted to sort of go back through your life. So starting with your childhood and growing up. So you said you grew up in Switzerland, right? In Geneva. And so you were there for how many years were you there for?
So I was in Switzerland for the first 24 years of my life. So I grew up in a traditional background. I went to a Catholic private school. Had kind of a traditional education with the French system, which is quite traditional because you have to follow one certain specific path. It's not as flexible, for example, as the British school system, where you can choose your topics and stuff, the topics you want to study. The French system usually need to study in the same way until you're 16, and then you can choose between 3 branches. But it's pretty strict in the way it's done, and it's quite difficult to get out of the mold, right? So yeah, I had a kind of traditional education, so Catholic education, and growing up, I didn't really have any LGBT role models. So the word LGBT actually didn't even exist. The acronym didn't exist in my reality. It wasn't something people talked about. There was no one LGBT, neither in my family nor in my group of friends or my parents' groups of friends. So really, there was no role models. To the point that I didn't even know what my parents actually thought about the topic or my surroundings thought about the topic. And so the only references that I had about homosexuality were quite negative, because at the time, in the 90s, we didn't have Tinder, we didn't have iPhones. The only information we got was either from TV or school, right, or from our parents. And since the information I got from my parents was non-existent, and the one from school was also quite limited, the only information I got about homosexuality was kind of the negative connotations that I heard in the schoolyard, right? The typical insults or jokes from children.
My
perception was quite negative. And then obviously I went to church, so obviously the perception or what I thought that the church thought about homosexuality was obviously negative. And And then on TV at the time, in the 90s, there were not that many LGBT people on TV.
Yeah.
A few references that were the typical gay guy or drag queen that was invited on those, but it wasn't really they were not really invited so that people understood what they went through. They were invited more to have fun or to make jokes, but it wasn't really to understand them. So the connotations that I had about homosexuality and LGBT people in general were quite negative. And so I grew up with a lot of internalized homophobia, thinking that, obviously that I was different, that I was strange, weird. And it took me some time to understand myself and to come out of the closet. Yeah.
Yeah, I can imagine. And growing up, do you have any siblings as well, or are you an only child? So
I have some siblings. Yes, I'm the youngest of 3 siblings.
Yeah.
And yeah, so I was always the small one in the family.
Yeah, because I can imagine, even for me, through school, it was kind of the start of the MySpace era. I remember MySpace days, and so seeing through school, and I was figuring out. I remember at first at the time, I knew it was going to go bad with my parents because my mom was super religious, my dad's super homophobic, and my sister was just a lot younger than me. So seeing in the school that there were 2 other gay guys that had been relentlessly bullied, I sort of buried it. And then when I think I came out initially at 16 as bisexual, at that stage, that was a way for me to soften the blow, but I was fully fledged homosexual from the beginning. And I'm wondering how
we all had a bisexual time, periods, but it didn't last very long.
Yeah, it's so true. And it's when I look back, it was I was buying Hilary Duff CDs 2004, whatever. I was a fully fledged into all of my, everything that I love and I'm proud to be now. But I'm wondering for you, what was your experience in terms of when you initially came out? Did you do it gradually with your family or with friends first? Or was it a more complex sort of process?
For me, it was, also gradually. So I knew I was gay since I was maybe 13, 14. And then came out when I was 16, more or less, at least to most of my friends and to part of my family. I waited until I was 16 because I thought that 16 was, when you started being kind of an adult. Although now when I look back, I realize that when you're 16, you're still a baby. But at the time, I felt like being 16 was, quite a good age to come out. But yeah, it was gradually, and for me, I knew that I could not live a lie, so I knew that I had to come out. I knew I had to say it because I just couldn't live a life that wasn't mine. So I decided to tell most of my friends, my family, and in general, this reception was quite good. So I was quite lucky, because I didn't suffer bullying. But I was always kind of still not allowing to be fully myself. So even though I was out, I wasn't talking about the topic, or I wasn't, because I felt like I was making people uncomfortable by talking about it. So for a long time, I didn't really talk openly about it with my family or with my friends. Well, everyone knew, but because I told them, but it wasn't really normalized, because I was still alone. So I came out when I was 16, but I didn't really meet any gays until I was 18, until I moved to London. I met my first few real gay friends. So I was still alone, and I didn't, so it was still, even though people accepted me, it was strange because I still very much felt different, because although I came out, I was still the only one in my school, the only one in my group of friends. So, for example, we went to parties, I couldn't flirt or live my sexuality or my life in the same way as my friends, right? So I was accepted, but at the same time, I went to parties. I was always the only gay guy. You know, I always say the same thing, that LGBT people don't have the same teenage years or development as other teenagers, because it's just our reality. Very often we're alone, right? So we don't do the same experiences. We don't get to fall in love with a person, or we don't get to have our first kiss in the same way as other people. So for me, it was also very, very kind of lonely, right? So always kind of feeling different, although I was accepted, but at the same time always feeling different. So it was a bit strange. And then I until I moved to London, and then when I moved to London, then I was living by myself, sharing a flat with another gay guy, who became my best friend at the time, and we went out to our first gay parties, gay clubs, gay bars, and that's when I started really being myself and discovering my sexuality, right? So it took some time. It was a process. And I always say that being LGBT is a process. It's something that accompanies you your entire life. It's not like you come out of the closet once when you're 16 and that's it. You come out of the closet every time you start a new job, every time you start in a new situation, you meet new people. You always ask yourself, am I in the right place? Am I in a safe place or not? Should I say it? Should I not? So it's something that accompanies your entire life, and it's always a process until you learn. After many years, you learn to be more and more comfortable in no matter which situation. But at first, I think the first few years, it's a lot of trial and error, and feeling uncomfortable many times, and not, at least for me, not being fully myself, and being very more introverted, or not always expressing myself fully. I just didn't feel like I could, or didn't feel comfortable.
And I think definitely in our teenage years, and even in adulthood, like, it's kind of like the sort of chameleon effect. It's like we're sort of trying to figure out the sort of parts that we've had to blend in, feeling like we had to project a certain image to protect ourselves from possible rejection, and then the true parts of ourselves. And that still then rolls into adulthood, going into new workplaces, going into new environments, changing cities, the sort of process of finding like ourselves and our identities. It's a different process for everyone, but it's definitely a lot different for us. I remember, kind of similar to you, like the era from 16 to 18, I was very sort of, I was in my emo days then. I went through many like different, sort of phases. Like, I was always trying to put on a different, I guess, character to divert away from my sexuality, because we just buried it in my family. We didn't speak about it again. And then suddenly, like you were 18, I used to take the train down to London. And so it was very like liberating, the sticky dance floors of heaven. You can probably remember.
I know them very well.
And so I'd get little glimpses like that, and maybe meet someone on a night out, but then I'd return, back up north. And it was only when I sort of started going into Manchester that I started to get more of that. But I'm like, I want the full like life. I don't want to keep having to be a chameleon and go back into a workplace back at home, or around my family back at home, and hide different parts of me. So for me, it wasn't until I moved to Madrid at 25 that I could fully be my authentic self. But even then, I didn't know what that was. I was like unpacking, all the layers and shedding off sort of the mask that I'd used to protect myself, because in my town, for England, it's a very small town, and the workplaces I worked in after uni were very much focused on, there was no inclusion. Like if there was someone that was gay, lesbian, anyone that did not fit like what's specific. It's kind of a sort of traditional town where everything's expected to flow in that typical way, like everyone, you know, kind of like it's not moved on from the 70s in a lot of ways. And so for me, it was like I had to break away, like seeing like the torment people would get in work from just being themselves. And I just hid everything away again until, apart from my friends, until I moved to Madrid. So it's very true what you said, like it's sort of finding, you know, your people. And I think when you finally make that step of moving and you get the liberation, there's still like that process of unmasking those parts, because we grow up with this sort of almost like it's like a defense mechanism, isn't it? Like we don't want to get hurt because we've experienced rejection at some point growing up, and or seen it like on TV. And so a lot of it through especially teenage years going into early adulthood is sort of the unmasking and figuring that sort of part out. And
definitely. I mean, I think starting a career, I mean, starting work and being in the workplace for the first time is always something scary for everyone. For anyone who starts their career, it's always a bit daunting, and you're always a bit scared, especially if you're with older people, right? With people who have more experience than you. So if you add also the extra layer of being LGBT and being scared of just being treated differently, or not getting the promotion that you want, or being made fun of, it's definitely something that you think twice before saying it or coming out or being visible, right? And that's what happened also to me. So when I started in the first times I was doing internships, but I did 2 or 3 internships before I actually started working full time. During my internships, I remember I was always in the closet and I didn't say anything to anyone because most of the time I was working, with older people, and I just didn't know how they would react. And also, the fact that just companies didn't have any policy or any information about the topic, right? About this kind of values of diversity and inclusion. So I just didn't, because of the fact, again, in the same way that when I was growing up, there was a lack of information about the topic. When I reached the workplace, it was the same lack of information. So when you don't know how people are going to react, you're just more scared of saying it. Whereas if the company clearly states that they are inclusive, that they don't care, and that they're going to protect you in case of discrimination, then it's much easier for you to come out. So for me, I started coming out when I actually started working full time, because of the fact that I was in a company where most people were my age, were very young. So it was most people were below 30, between 25 and 35. So it was a very culture, very international. So kind of an open-minded environment. So there I felt much more comfortable to say it. But it's really until after a few years, after already 1 or 2 years of working, that I actually came out. And it was very impressive for me to see the statistics, right? When I started working and learning a little bit about the statistics of the number of LGBT people in the closets in the workplace, we see that it's still more or less between 50 and 60% of people hiding their identity in the workplace. That's in Western countries, so in the most advanced countries in the world. And in Spain, which is one of the most advanced countries in terms of LGBT rights, a country that has specific policies and laws that protect LGBT people against discrimination in the workplace. There's still half the people who are scared of coming out, right, and being themselves, although they're protected. So it can seem a bit strange, right? A bit surprising. And I think it has to do a lot with the lack of information from the companies, a lack of information regarding their values, about their stance on the topic. And also the fact that, we grew up in a society that was just completely different.
So true.
Things have changed just so much. I mean, they've changed drastically even in 20 years. So a lot of us, I think, still have a lot of the reactions or the reflexes or the behavior that we had 15, 20 years ago to protect ourselves, right?
Yeah,
Or
yeah,
many of us, suffered bullying or felt different or have had this internalized homophobia. We still carried with us today, right?
yeah,
So today's society is completely different, but still we still have these fears, right? So in order to change this, I always say that it's the company's responsibility to state that or to send this message of inclusion in order for people to come out, and not the other way around. You shouldn't
yeah,
wait to have gay people or LGBT people outside of the closet to then have diversity and inclusion policies. You first need those policies so that you have this clear message of inclusion, and then people can come out, because people have still a lot of fears.
yeah. So true.
And just don't really know how to act. So it's definitely something that has to be communicated.
Yeah, definitely, for sure. So I remember, like, even for me, when I went to Madrid, you know how open it is there. I still had all the fear. Like, I'd never in a workplace, I'd never in my real life, like, been able to fully express myself. So sometimes remember the first year in Madrid, yeah, I was a bit of a hot mess, but it's like, because you have suddenly everything that you're not experiencing and you're not used to, and it's suddenly, oh, I'm living on my own, I'm completely free, and but I'm still carrying all this sort of baggage and this generational, like, feeling of, oh, you've got to block this out. And not just even with sexuality, like, definitely with past generations, me with my ADHD, for example, I have often felt like the need to hide or mask that, and hide and mask that in the workplace too, and with problems with my anxiety and stuttering, all these things. I put so much pressure on myself, and so much pressure that even when I went to Madrid, I found myself in the teaching world. And it's very easy when you're a teacher to project a character, because you've got to keep bachillerato and all these teenagers entertained. But I definitely had experiences of being outed, and my feeling, it was weird, because my fear in school was I did not want to be found out. And then suddenly, as a teacher, I was being outed by 18-year-old kids who were already on Grindr and all the apps, or going to gay parties, and then they'd see me when I was trying to live my life outside the teaching world, and then it would spread like wildfire. And then at first it was something that was difficult, but gradually, as the years went on, I was just like, with each academy or school that I went to, it sort of got a lot easier. But the first year, I remember, just because I'd grown up with such, so used to sort of being that chameleon that sort of presents a different character to protect myself, I was very, like, terrified, I guess, of sort of being my authentic self, especially in a workplace environment. And I know a lot of people still feel like that now. And I'm wondering for you if there was a specific turning point or event that made you really so passionate about, the diversity and inclusion and everything that you're doing today. Like, did you have a really specific event, or was it something that developed as a passion as you sort of went along?
Well, myself, I started working in human resources, so I worked for various types of companies in different roles, always in HR, because I always felt like the area in the company where I could have the most impact in people's lives was human resources.
Yeah.
That's how I started working in HR and in companies. Then I got a HR master as well, so it's really reinforced my interest for the topic.
Yeah.
But I always felt, every time I was working in HR, I always felt like something was missing, because I felt like I was very much focused on processes, on hiring, on contracts, etc., but not as much on people, right? And what I love about human resources was working on people. And then at some point, I got a health issue that led me to having mental health struggles. And going through a different phase in my life. And that's when I contacted with COGAM, so with this LGBT NGO here in Madrid, to reach out for help and support. And I did, and it went really well, and it really helped me. But I also met a lot of LGBT people that were going through very difficult situations, even more difficult situations than myself. And it made me think, and I thought that it started making me think about, that I wanted to do something for the community. And at some point, they offered me, from the NGO, they offered me to develop for them the program that gives trainings to companies on LGBT inclusion, because at the time they were giving a lot of trainings in schools, so a lot of awareness trainings and sessions in schools, in high schools, but they were not doing anything in companies. It's something that has started in the past 5 years, more or less, in Spain. It's been around longer in the UK, in the US. It's a topic that has been already discussed in companies for a long time in those countries. But in Spain and in Europe, more or less, it's been talked now for 5 years, more or less. So, I really started by coincidence. I started working in this field, helping this NGO develop trainings, awareness sessions, having roundtables about LGBT inclusion in the workplace. And and I absolutely loved it. And that's when I said, wow, like I'd love to be able to live from it, and to take my experience that I have already in human resources, my own personal experience, as a gay man, and just make a mix of it and try to develop my own trainings, right? So after a while, I decided to found my own company, and I created Be Diverse, which is a diversity and inclusion company. So I do diversity and inclusion trainings in general, not only the LGBT topic, but all types of diversity and inclusion. But obviously, I'm very much specialized on the LGBT topic because it's my life, and it's what I like most. And that's what I've been doing for the past years, and trying to use my knowledge, my experiences, and try to make workplaces a bit more inclusive for LGBT people in general, and change things, because I've realized that there's still a lot of, as we mentioned, a lot of fear, right? A lot of people that are scared of talking about this topic, even people who are my age, my generation. They're still scared. I see it among my friends. That there's still a lot of people that are scared of talking about this topic. So I thought, why not trying to make a change, and really focusing on a topic that motivates me, that I love, and where I can really have an impact.
I think that's the most important thing, because you're doing something that's so important for the community, but also you have such a passion behind it, and it's something that, for all of us in the community, we sort of find these struggles and different paths as we go along through our personal lives and workplace lives. And I always say, a lot of the people you spend time around in the workplace are the people you spend the most time with in your life, pretty much. So if you can't be yourself around them, it's a heavy burden to carry, like every day, like going into a workplace and feeling like you have to mask a part of what makes you you. And I think it's so important to reach that place where, for me, I reached a place where I felt like I would have a potential for a double rejection. Like, is it going to be for my sexuality, or is it going to be for my ADHD and being distracted with my stuttering and all these different things that come along with it? And so I was always like, the fear of sort of a double rejection, and gradually through the years sort of letting go of that. But I know for every person, they have their own unique, different experience. And I wonder when was the point where you realized, you were like, look, this is me, 100% me, accept it, like in the workplace and out of it, and you were fully like, this is me. Like, what's that Disney movie? That one.
Well, I think it was a process, obviously, but at some point, when I was having, health issues, also mental health issues related to it, I thought, you know what, life is too short again to live a life which is not mine,
Yeah,
and to try to always please other people. And at the end of the day, you need to know what are your priorities, right? And my priorities were to be myself and to have a job where I could have an impact, right? I didn't want to live my life on autopilot. I didn't want to
yeah,
live a life that wasn't mine, and to wake up with 50 or 60 years old and realize that I've been living a life which wasn't mine, right?
yeah,
um, I felt like I had been living for a long time, yeah, trying to please other people, right? That's what happens very often for LGBT people. We try to put on this character and to always please other people so that we feel accepted, right?
yeah,
And at some point I thought, well, why don't I use my privilege, right? The education that I have, the experience that I have, and try to make something good out of it, right? And try to use the some of the suffering that I went through as a fuel to actually make something good, something bigger than me, and try to contribute to the LGBT community and make things change. Because although a lot of young people think that everything is done already and that because we have equal rights, everything is done, there's still a lot of work to do, and there's
yeah,
a lot of achievements to get until we get full and real equality in society, right? So
yeah. It's so
that's
true.
really my purpose.
Yeah, it's so true. And I think it's such an important message to put out there because, yeah, even with the younger generation, I remember when I was teaching, like whenever I worked in a school, like in my last few years of teaching, like it was around COVID times, but I remember like were openly like kids that were completely themselves and were not being, mocked or bullied for it. And it made me so happy as a teacher. And I know it's different in every school, but I feel like, yeah, the younger generation now has so many resources and so many ways to connect as well with, from online to role models and different, from queer artists as well. So many different areas to sort of take on, well, yeah, the ability to, as they're finding themselves, have sort of other people they can identify with and listen from and learn from. And for us, we didn't really have that. So there's still a lot of people in workplaces and a lot of people that are still navigating that process of feeling comfortable. Like I remember my most recent job, the first day when they, often they do those sort of games where it's like get to know each other and things like that. I was like, look, I have ADHD, I'm gay. Just to put it all out there. And was like, I'm just gonna do that in any job from now on. And I'm like, then I don't feel like that pressure that I felt in the past to overachieve in work in certain areas, to mask the fact that with my ADHD I might hyper focus or get distracted. And in the past, I'd grown up, in my town, and also the first schools I worked in when I was in Madrid, in an environment where you sort of felt you had to hide. And so it's like, in the end, you reach that point, take me as I am, but it's a process for everyone for sure. And
and I think everyone handles it in a different way. And obviously the idea is not to out anyone or to force anyone to be visible if they don't want to. The idea is for people to have the option in the workplace, if they want to say it, right? If they don't want to, they don't have to. But the idea is at least not to lie, right? Because what happens very often is that in order for other people not to see you as you are, you start creating a character and you start lying about who you are. So it's very important to at least give the option to people to say it. And then if people don't feel like saying it, they don't have to, but at least give the option to people. right?
Yeah, definitely.
It's a process again. Yeah, it's something that accompanies you your entire life, and yeah, everyone has to go at their own pace. And if you look at studies, we see that older generations, for example, there's what we call the lost generation. There's people who are around 50, 60 years old who are LGBT and who haven't come out and will never come out in the workplace because they're from a generation where they've been so long in the closet that it's just impossible for them, or they just don't see it as possible, right? So there's already a lost generation for older people, and for younger people we see that they're actually more in the closet than people who are mid-aged, right? So younger people who are studying their career can be surprising because, as you said, they're the most free generation in the history, but still, because of the lack of experience and the fear when you enter the workplace, etc., they tend to be more in the closet and then progressively come out a little bit more. But it's still, I just was working on a study recently that showed that around 20% of LGBT people go back to the closet. So who are out of the closet in their private life, they will go back to the closet when they start a new job. So that's still a number that we need to work on to make sure that it decreases, and make sure that everyone feels comfortable to say it.
Yeah, so true. It's so important as well, because I think everyone's at their own journey in different areas in their lives, but once you find a workplace and a job that you love and you have that sort of inclusion and diversity there, it's like everything in your life outside the workplace starts to align as well, because you don't feel that burden, that stress of maybe carrying two different lives. And people, I always say, like, there's certain jobs I've had where I've kept my private life outside of work very private, and certain friendships you make, you're very open with. So it's different with every job position anyway, even if you're out of the closet, and people are always, it's always up to them how much they're willing to share. But I think having the comfortability and the just knowing that the workplace is a place that can be a safe space, instead of having to put on that sort of masking and character, is one of the most important things. And especially for the young generation to know that, like, they will find a project, a career, a workplace that will be inclusive, but it can take time, and it's like you will get there. Sometimes it takes a while. Like for me, it's only been in the last couple of years, but everyone finds their way eventually.
Yeah, of course. And I mean, myself, I always encourage people, right, to be visible. I think that's our strongest tool that we have, strongest asset that we have as a community, because LGBT people, we're everywhere in society. We're in all families, all groups of friends, social classes, religions, everywhere. There's always an LGBT person. They might be in the closet, but they're always there. They're always present. So the strongest way we have to change society is by being visible, because if we're all visible in all our circles and all our social spaces in society, we can really bring change. And I think that's also one of the secrets why LGBT rights have changed so fast, have evolved in such a big and incredible way in recent years. It's because of that, because of the fact that we're in all social aspects of society. So I always encourage people to be visible, to get involved also in companies. There's so many things you can do. You can create an employee resource group for LGBT people to try to organize activities, sessions, workshops, initiatives. There's so many things you can do. If you work in HR, you can try to improve the recruitment processes, for example. So making sure that you have an inclusive recruitment process for all your employees. To avoid discrimination. When you're, for example, if you work in communication, you can have an inclusive communication internally and externally. So you can also, social media, make sure that you celebrate Pride, that you celebrate all the different dates, key dates, about the LGBT community that are around during the year. There's so many things you can do even as a person in your day-to-day job, and also as an ally. If you're not part of the community and you want to support, there's so many things you can do in your position. If you're in HR, as I mentioned, it can be recruitment. If it's communication, then social media or internal communication. If you're in anything that has to do with policies, internal policies, you can develop specific policies, like to not discriminate LGBT people in the workplace, and make sure that there's a clear protocol in case of discrimination, or that there's also a protocol for trans people, for example, to bring them through the transition. So there's many things you can do, and small steps, one step at a time, you can really change things within your company and within your environment.
Yeah, it's so true. And I think as well, for people like to have, the ability now to, for example, with LinkedIn, there's so many networking groups, and that's how I've connected with a lot of people over the last year. And before that, I wasn't even really a LinkedIn person. I made it last May. I mean, so late to the party, really. And also meet up to go out. There's a lot of groups where you can do different networking events, social events, and you can meet people from the community and really sort of build your confidence and sort of start to find, because it can be isolating. Like, I know for me, when I moved to Madrid, I didn't know anyone. When I moved to Barcelona, I didn't know anyone. I don't know for you if it was similar when you went to Madrid, if you knew people already, or
not really, no.
Yeah, so it can be difficult at first, and I found it was sort of the last year with Barcelona, everything from meetup with these groups where you can go to different networking events, or even just groups that you can sort of be yourself and find, from hiking groups and things outside the workplace, sports groups, things, whatever your passions are that you really enjoy, and also have it on the sort of networking side on your social media, being able to just be like, yeah, this is me. And it's a process for everyone, but I think it's so great that we've got so many of these groups out there now, and that you're really pushing, that initiative for people. So I think it's something that, you should be very proud of. And thanks so much for doing that for the community, because it's something that obviously every day we have to keep pushing for. But just the fact that these initiatives are out there already, and there's so much progress being made and still so much to do, but knowing that the support is out there for people, I think is great, because everyone eventually finds their place, and that includes in the workplace as well.
Hopefully we're gonna make things change, and hopefully in a few years we won't need to talk about this topic. But until we get there, it's important to really have these conversations, talk about it, and really have initiatives not only around Pride Month, but really throughout the year. Commit to this kind of values and propositions.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, and I would say, what would you say are sort of the main sort of things that in Spain that we still really need to sort of push and work on at the moment?
In Spain, so Spain is a great example of LGBT inclusion, because it just approved a law last year which forces companies with more than 50 employees to have specific diversity and inclusion policies to include LGBT people in the workplace. So we're one of the leading countries in the world in that sense. So that's great. Actually, it was one of the laws that was missing because of the fact that there's still a lot of, as we mentioned, people in the closet. Also, the trans community, it was a law that was very much needed because in Spain, around 80% of the trans community is unemployed. So there's still a lot of issues with the trans community because of, you know, the bullying they've suffered, etc. It's really difficult for them to enter the market because many of them haven't been able to finish school or even to get university studies because of all the suffering and bullying that they suffered. So it's also quite difficult for them to enter the labor market. So this law, what it does is to try and encourage that, to try and encourage the inclusion of LGBT people in general.
Yeah.
And also to have specific policies to include trans people who have specific needs and necessities. And in that sense, Spain has done very well. We're going to see now how it goes for the next few months and years, because it was just this law was approved last year and really implemented this year. So we're starting now to really support companies in that sense. There's still a lot of work to do.
Yeah,
but definitely, I think that's a great law because it's going to force most companies to have specific initiatives, policies. And again, I think really important to train people in all employees, if you can, on LGBT inclusion concepts, definitions, etc. So people know how to use the right vocabulary, right words, to avoid microaggressions, and the typical, to avoid the typical jokes or comments that we still hear. That are very ingrained in our conversations and in our society. So
definitely.
in that sense, I think it's really good to train people in general. Then obviously specific training is needed for HR people, so people that are working recruitment, to avoid the discrimination in recruitment. And then everything that has to do with again, accompanying trans people through their transition. I think most companies have no idea what is the usual protocol or the steps they have to follow if a trans person comes up and say that they want to start the transition. So really important to have these kind of procedures already in place and defined clearly, so that whenever the situation occurs, you have the right tools to implement it. So I think those would be the main areas of work that still companies have to do. But I think we're in a great direction and great moment in time, because we've reached really a historical agreement. I think we're one of the only country in the world that has such a law that goes so far. So really looking forward to seeing how this evolves.
Yeah, I think that's such a great message. And yeah, thank you so much, because I think everything that you are standing for and pushing every day is so important. And for those that, that are arriving to the workplace kind of a little bit lost and still have faced prejudice in the past. And so it's very important to really, through the recruitment process and onwards, find those sort of key things that I always say with companies. For example, look at their LinkedIn pages, like really look at their posts and who's working there or worked there, and see how inclusive they're being as well. And definitely, eventually we all find our place. But I think what you're doing is super amazing, and it's really great for the community. So thanks so much today for coming on and sharing your story. And so for people to know, where can they find you and where can they find all your...
Yes, I mean, you can find me on LinkedIn. So my name is Diego Lazaro. You can find me on LinkedIn, or you can look at my website, so Be Diverse. You can find me on Google as well. So happy to connect. If you have any questions, any doubts, and if you need any further information, please don't hesitate to reach out. I'll be happy to help. Thank you, Connor, also for your time. It was a pleasure to see you as always, and yes, be in touch for future events.
Yeah, thank you so much for coming on today. And yeah, so everyone, make sure you go and check out Diego's LinkedIn and have a look for, and remember, for everyone out there struggling going into the workplace and also finding your career path, like I've been everything from a teacher to producing music to content, like you'll find your way not only in the workplace but in your career path. And the main thing I would say to wrap this up is, yeah, the sort of chameleon layers that you will shed when you feel that comfortability, that is the most important thing. So thank you so much, Diego, for coming on, and thank you to all the listeners. So we will be back next week with another episode of the Queerness Diaries. So yeah, thank you, Diego, and I shall speak to you soon. So thanks so much.
Thank you everyone. Bye-bye.
Okay, thanks.